When I'm giving people guidance, one of the biggest portions, and actually the majority of what I do, is energy work, and that's verbally. I can do it many other ways, but verbally is probably the most common and the biggest part of it. So doing the energy work, through sacred geometry, they call it the Merkaba, and I manually activate your Merkaba, and that is your light body energy, which increases your conscious awareness and your intelligence. And so I ascend your soul to a higher dimensional consciousness. And so many of times I've gotten the same response, and I'll get to that part, but today I was giving a young man some guidance, and he was kind of in a weird spot in his life, and it was because he kind of didn't understand what was going on with him. He went through a breakup with a girl, and he said it changed him, and so I was kind of explaining to him that a lot of times it will trigger a spiritual awakening. And so he was kind of like, well, I hadn't been through a lot of trauma with like my family, because that's generally a lot of times when it happens is with family, or when you lose somebody, the loss of life, even a pet. I mean, it's something that's traumatic, and in his case it's a relationship, so that is something he developed feelings for. And so when the breakup happened, it was traumatic on him, and he didn't realize how traumatic it was until we started talking about it. And I said, most likely the reason why you feel different is because you're going through a spiritual awakening. And it was because he was kind of explaining that he felt, he used to be really socially bubbly, out there, talkative, and then after the breakup and the trauma, it kind of made him a little more closed off a little bit. And at first he was kind of explaining, like, I don't know if I just came kind of antisocial, or, and I said, no. I said, I don't see that at all. I don't feel that at all. I said, I would call it reserved. And reserved is a big difference than antisocial. That just means you're more selective of who you let in your life, and that's actually a very important thing and a good thing. So I don't feel like you're antisocial. I said, I feel like you're more reserved. And he kind of realized, he was like, yeah, you're kind of right. He was like, I'm very selective of now who I let in my life, because it was such a traumatic experience with this girl. And so I kind of explained to him, I said, most likely you're going through a spiritual awakening. And at first he was not real sure about that, because he said he always feared spiritual awakenings, because he didn't want to be closed off in his consciousness and being like stuck in his head all the time. And I said, you're not. I said, you actually step out of the box and you look at life from a different perspective. And I said, you understand it from a different intelligence and a different perspective, just a different way. You see it differently. It was kind of like you opened my eyes. And what he was explaining is I manually activated his Merkaba. And your Merkaba is your light body energy. And so before I could kind of explain this to him, he kept telling me, I don't know what you did to me. You opened my eyes, but you make me feel lighter. And I couldn't really pinpoint what he was feeling other than he felt lighter. And I told him, I said, we activated your Merkaba, and that is your light body energy. And I said, when we activate your light body energy, that's where you see the world from a different perspective, like he was explaining. You open my eyes, and it allows you to have a different intelligence, which is understanding you're going through a spiritual awakening. So you're not antisocial, you're reserved. And so he just kept saying it over and over. He was like, I feel so different, like I don't know what you did. And so when this happens, you're releasing emotional trauma. And so through this, activating your Merkaba is sacred geometry. And so I was kind of explaining to him that it's energy. And I said, this is where science would come in and say, it's not real. I said, but you just felt it's real. And so with that, he's like, I have so many questions for you. I said, okay, hold off on your questions. I said, I want you to process everything we just talked about and everything you're going through. And I said, and when you're ready, you reach back out and I'll answer any question you got, but allow yourself to process what you're going through, because the activation is powerful. And all he could do was thank me. He was like, thank you. Like, I feel different. And that is probably the most common response that I get when I activate somebody's Merkaba. Another woman that I did this to, she lost a baby. And so anytime she would ever go out in public, she was very jealous, very envious of women that had a baby. Like, she couldn't handle it. She couldn't be in public around people with another baby. And so with her, we also did some energy work, and we activated her Merkaba, and it provides inner peace. And her exact words were the same. I don't know what you did to me, but you changed me. I feel different. And so when you activate your light body energy, or your Merkaba, you literally increase your dimensional conscious awareness. It's where you learn what's going on, spiritual awakening, but you also feel different, and you feel lighter. And that is because you're physically releasing energy and cellular trauma. You're releasing that density. And so very, very, very powerful and truly amazing. And like I said, kind of a lot of what my work is I do it verbally, so it's just conversation, but through the conversation I can activate your Merkaba and your light body energy and change your entire conscious awareness and perspective of life, and for the better.